Okay, the time is 6:30. I'll call this work session of the mayor and council to order. We'll go over the regular business meeting agenda first. Tonight for invocation, we'll have a moment of silence. Now receive a copy of the minutes. We'll have a pledge of the flag. Under proclamations, we'll have two tonight, one for PTSA month, membership month, and one for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month that we do typically every year. Minutes. We've broken the minutes down by the individual meetings. I know that Councilman Emmanuel sent an email to Ms. Richardson about going back to action minutes. Ms. Richardson did talk to me about that. I think it was Friday afternoon, I'm not certain. And she felt like she needed more than one council member telling her to change the minutes. So if that's what council wants to do, we can have a motion on that tonight. To revise them, it's just that it needs to be a consensus among council to change them to action minutes. Okay. And we'll need a motion on each of the agenda items.
Are there any of the minutes that we can approve?
That's my perspective.
We have no invited guests tonight under community department reports. I saw Mr. Williams here. Do you have something you need to report on tonight? Okay. Mr. Sanders?
No.
Okay. And Mr. Scott here?
He will be.
Under old business public hearing, we'll have a first reading. If I can get a motion just to waive the first reading and place it on our next agenda, is that right? Which will be September. Something.
14 is out. 24th.
22nd.
Way to go, man. Sorry. 1 second.
You got a rewind button there?
Those writers, they can't add.
I'm like, it's 22nd.
All right, then, Jason, is there anything you need to tell us about that tonight? New business, we have the mobile stage for Lawrenceville. I know we talked about needing to add a fee. Are we doing that with this?
$100.
And is Lawrenceville okay with that?
I don't know about those Lawrenceville people.
Get them to pay up front.
We send Vito to collect.
We can do that.
Then we have Brittany Marmol to the Parks and Rec Board. Any
Is that-
other questions?
Do we have a report back again from the members of that committee?
Remember, they don't have a quorum to meet, and I told you at the last meeting, I had spoken with Mr. Odom and with Adam.
But there's more than those two people.
There's Mr. Pohl. I don't know, I wasn't able to get in touch with Mr. Pohl. I don't have.
Yeah, I reckon either, he hasn't responded yet.
So 2 of the 3 have said it's okay.
But I didn't have any, since I didn't have her application, I really didn't know what I was gonna tell him even if he did respond, so.
Well, has Mr. Roland and the other gentleman seen her application, seen the application?
I don't know, I haven't either.
Mr. Odom and Adam are just anxious to get back to meetings, so they are happy with just moving forward.
Can I ask a question? The city attorney, can the boards meet, but just no vote, no, that they just kind of meet and discuss, or is that a no-no as well as not
Perfectly
get?
fine. They can't take official action without meetings
But
and
they
formal
can meet
requirements.
and discuss it to keep up to date with what they're doing, and then when they finally have a quorum, then they can do their voting.
Right.
Okay. Do they do that?
We haven't, but I'm gonna need to pretty soon, so I'm glad you asked that.
Because I think we also have, I think Susan Shepherd, she also has an application
Yep.
that,
Yeah, hers went in
There
about
need to
a
go
week
over.
ago, I think.
And you got that one?
That one I got, yeah, she came to me and I told her what the process was, and she put it in, and Karen, I think, sent it out.
I'm not inclined, Susan's a great volunteer, but she's already involved in several different things, so I'm not inclined to nominate her for the Parks Board. I'll go ahead and let you know that now. So,
Of course.
I think we need some diversity, and we think we need some new people involved. I think Brittany has been coming to the council meetings. I think Mr. Witt, she helped you in your campaign. I know she's been involved in the city for a long time.
Mayor, it's a matter of we set a system in place, and I'm not going to be the first one to go against that, just because I know the candidate. I believe that we set a system in place, the system needs to work. The fact that there's not a quorum, Again, I would just, as the department head doesn't have an application, that means that probably none of the people on the board have seen an application. I just believe that we need to go by the systems that we set in place. I think when the system's in place, you don't deviate from that system, you use it. You run the system runs the operation.
So noted, I'm going forward with my nomination tonight, and council can take whatever action they choose.
So you're just saying you're not going to go by the system?
I think we discussed this when we passed the resolution. We made recommendations that you were not going to approve a nomination unless I followed a certain procedure. And we had a discussion that as mayor, I have this whole authority to make the nomination and not inclined to follow any procedure that you want to place on me for the nomination. I believe we've made every effort to follow the procedure by contacting the board members. I believe it's a shame that the Park and Recs Board hasn't been able to meet for several months, and that you want to delay this because of some procedure. When we have a perfectly fine candidate that could be confirmed tonight so that they can meet. All right, that concludes our regular agenda. We'll move on to the work session agenda. Do you have any correspondence we need to review? Mr. Powell,
I need an executive
do you have paperwork?
session.
You have an executive session? That brings us to our discussion items, the Harbor Oaks daycare traffic. I know we put the barrier in place.
We did, and just now talked to Ms. Rollins, and we have a little more work to do. Apparently, somebody has transgressed over one of our timbers. So we'll go back to work on that. We'll try to take it to the next.
Had they transgressed properly, that piece of rebar would have been in the tire.
They were lucky.
But they were improperly transgressing. They were not successful in placing the rebar in the tire.
We'll see if we can halt that type of activity.
We have additional rebar?
Are you going to give us our report? Oh, I didn't see the gentleman. Can we have the town green plan redesign update?
Can you serve this spot for a minute, Mayor?
No, I'm good.
Please, I just emailed you the application that Aaron had sent us. Perfect. Okay.
Mayor, council, and guests in the room, we have been working diligently with the constituents and stakeholders for the town green area, which is our little green out here, which had several recognized issues that we were hoping to solve. And through an RFP process, Michael Kidd and Root Design was hired to look at the issues, and he would like an opportunity, and I'd like to share with you his presentation tonight. So, Michael?
All right, thanks Eric, and thank you all for your time. If you could go to the next slide, we'll talk about just quickly, some of the project goals and objectives that were laid out when we started the project a few months ago. One of the first things that came up over and over again was improving safety at the crossing from City Hall into the park across Oak Road. Another big safety issue was protection along Highway 78. Increasing available power within the park was a big issue that came up for the farmers market and also for the events. And accommodating both of those within our design was extremely important. So we met with the farmers market, we met with the stats group, and talked about how they use that area since they're the majority users of that space, and what sort of things they would need to accommodate the market and the events. Providing more options for seating within the park. There are no areas to sit right now, so that was a big issue. Identifying locations for signage and coordinating with Sky Design, who is under contract to do the design for the signage for the city. Ensuring that it's consistent with the town green overlay and the future expansion of the town green, so we wanted to make sure that we didn't do anything that prohibited the future expansion of the park. And then finally, making it feel safe and inviting when there's not an event or the farmers market going on, so that people can use that space more as a park during the 6 months of the year where there's not a scheduled event going on. That was another important factor to work into the design. So we'll start with the overall site plan. You can go back one, right there. This is the overall site plan, and you'll see these numbers as well. These are tied into a cost estimate that I did along with the design, which the council members have in front of you. So you can kind of follow along. We're going to work our way counterclockwise, or we're going to kind of snake around the park this way, and follow those numbered items so that you can also see the budget estimates that we're talking about with those different items. So,
Need another copy?
Yeah.
the first area that we'll talk about is the first bullet on that previous slide, which is the crossing between City Hall and the park at Oak Road. So Eric, if you'll go to the next slide. This is the area that we're talking about right here. This is where people cross for the farmers market and for the events. Most of the people park behind City Hall and then walk over to the town green. And that's the majority of the foot traffic right there. So right now you have security guards that direct traffic across the street, police officers. But during the farmers market, the road stays open, and I believe during some of the events as well, it's open. So that pedestrian vehicular conflict is a big issue. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you what we're proposing for this area. This is Oak Road right here. City Hall is back this way, and this is that corner of the town green, which is really the primary entrance for pedestrians that are coming to the town green. So we're proposing a speed table actually on Oak Road. One, to slow traffic down, and two, to designate that pedestrian crossing so that there's a specific place that people know where they need to go to cross the road. Another function that this serves is as you come up these ramps, you end up at grade with the sidewalk. So right now, when vehicles, when trucks and cars are coming in to load and unload primarily for the farmer's market, they're either coming onto the sidewalk at this curb cut right here and then turning into the park this way, or they're having to jump the curb. So this speed table actually serves as a way for vehicular access to easily enter the park without having to hop that curb and without having to make, I saw some trucks pulling trailers trying to get in there and it was a little tight. So this gives a very easy and defined access point into the park for vehicles and for pedestrians. At this corner here, we're looking at doing a nice landscaped entrance with an identification sign for the town green to signify that this is the primary entrance for that park. And then as you come into the park, this is a slight ramp down into the park, and I'll explain that elevation change in a minute. This hatched area is all brick pavers. That's the landscaping, like I said, and that leads you into the park here. So go to the next slide, we'll go to the next area that we're looking at, which is the property line between the park and the bank. And right now, this is what that area looks like. This is the Bank of America sign out on Highway 78. And then there are 2 or 3 areas where people just cut through the shrubs when they're coming from that parking lot to enter the park. The bank has some security restrictions on how high the shrubs can be around the bank for safety reasons. But one of the things that we're looking at, if you go to the next slide, to improve that area a little bit, we're looking at actually constructing a set of brick stairs. It's not a very big, it's like a 5-foot wide stairway with maybe 5 or 6 steps to get down the grade change. And then the area along that, where that slope is, right behind the parking lot, we would take out those juniper and put in some shrubs that would get a little bit taller to prevent people from making their own pathways down that slope. So again, just designating these entry points is going to clean that area up and make it safer and more user-friendly for people that are coming to the park. All the landscaping here, which is not colored in, it's shown in white, that's existing, that's the landscaping that the bank currently has, and that's proposed to just stay as is. A couple other items in this area. One is a big power panel right here that we want to try to screen with some evergreens. And 2 is a permanent location for the portable stage. If you go to the next slide, this is the power panel that I'm sure all of y'all have seen out there now. And we might end up needing to expand on this as well. So we want to look at ways that we can soften that with landscaping. If you go to the next slide. This is the location where the stage sits for the events. And one of the other kind of overall issues that we talked about was trying to find a permanent location for that stage for the town green. Because right now it goes from this location back to the corner at Highway 78 and Oak Road for the farmer's market. So it's moving back and forth all the time. When we met with the farmer's market, one of the things that they said is that the musical acts that would be on this kind of stage are really too overpowering for the farmer's market. And some of the vendors were complaining about the noise and they weren't able to interact with their customers, the vendors that are right around the stage itself. So they would prefer a much smaller stage area for, you know, one person and a guitar and a microphone, or a quartet, or, you know, much smaller musical acts for the farmer's market itself, which I'll show you how we're going to accommodate that here shortly. But this would become the permanent location for the stage, which is really just the events. So when there's not an event going on, the stage would be elsewhere, unless it can stay in that spot and just be closed down. The next slide goes back to that same view. We talked about screening that power panel. And for the stage, we're looking at constructing some concrete footers for all the outriggers that the stage sits on. That helps, in keeping the stage level. That's a big issue right now when they have to set it up. It's not always in the same spot, the ground's uneven, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of coordination to get the stage level and secure. So this would provide an area. These longer spots right here are actually where the rear wheels would sit for the stage. So they could literally just drive up to those spots and then stop. And then the outriggers would come down on those concrete footers, so that it's in the same spot every time and you don't have to go through that, you know, reinventing the wheel when you're setting up that stage. You go to the next slide. This is the next area we're going to talk about, which is along Highway 78. And this was a big issue that came up in terms of safety primarily for kids that are in the park during these events and during the farmer's market. The fact that there's currently no physical barrier between the park and Highway 78, which is a major thoroughfare. You've got that sidewalk there, and you've obviously got the street trees. And those trees, believe it or not, do provide some sort of physical and psychological barrier, but it's pretty minimal. So we really wanted to beef that up. If you go to the next slide, I'll talk about what we're planning on doing there. This is a very simple solution, basically just a brick wall that would run that whole length of 78, that would only be about 2 to 3 feet tall, but it would provide enough of a physical barrier so that kids aren't going to run out into the street. They're not going to be tempted to do that. If they're kicking a ball around, the wall is going to stop that ball from going out in the street. And then on the other side, between the wall and the sidewalk, we would have a 10-foot landscape strip with shrubs and the street trees and the street lights as well. So that whole area works together to provide that physical and psychological barrier and allow you to feel safe within that space so that you're not just wide open to the surrounding roadway. We've identified a potential location along that wall for a permanent LED sign, which again, Sky Design is working on the signage. We're coordinating with them on some locations within the park. But that would be a permanent LED message kind of marquee sign that could advertise what's going on in the park that week or that day, what's going on within the city. So that's basically the solution for Highway 78. Go to the next slide. This kind of shows you in section what that element looks like. This is Highway 78 out here, and you've got your existing 6-foot sidewalk. This is our 10-foot proposed landscape strip. And then you've got your 3-foot wall behind that. So when you're inside the park, even though there's no grade change here, because of the wall and the landscaping, you actually feel like you're at a lower elevation, which provides additional kind of psychological safety, a sense of safety when you're in the park. Go to the next slide. On the opposite side, we've got the condition along Oak Road. This is the current condition. This is for the farmer's market, and this is how this is set up. We've got a 6-foot landscape strip with your 10-foot sidewalk, street lights, and then street trees, and then your booths. And you can see the power source is all coming from the street lights. So we've got cords winding all through here, which is not a very safe situation. And it's not very attractive along Oak Road either. So we wanted to look at cleaning that up and making Oak Road a more engaging and inviting space during these events. Go to the next slide. This is what we're proposing to do here, and this is really the major design element for the park. We talked about accommodating future expansion of the park as well, and what we wanted to do was to create a really strong rhythm along Oak Road that could then be repeated as this park expands off to the west. And what we did, we started with the streetlight locations, because those aren't going to change. And those are at regular intervals along the road, right behind the sidewalk. So we've designated those with some brick pavers. And then in between those, we've got the trees. And every other bay has a double tree with a planter. And then in between that, we've got a single tree, which actually has a paved plaza area underneath it with a tree grate. So these spaces become pedestrian access, kind of a secondary access into the park. This right here indicates a little set of stairs, and then again, that gray wall is a seat wall that snakes along that whole section of Oak Road. That would be 16 to 18 inches tall, not a very big grade change, but again, it's enough to provide that sense of safety when you're in the park. Another thing that this does is provide a tremendous amount of seating now. Because you can sit on that brick wall, and you don't have to have benches out there, you don't have to have tables and chairs. That's important when there's not an event going on, but it's also important during the farmer's market, if people buy food and want a place to sit and eat. Currently, there's not a way to do that. So when there's not an event, these areas here create these little nooks where people can sit and feel safe in a much smaller group. If you can imagine that big open lawn right now, if you were there with one or two of your friends, it would feel a little unsettling. I mean, it's a big space, and you kind of feel lost. There's no real sense of place there right now. And what we've done is created these little pockets where people can come and sit when those trees grow up and there's actually shade out there. Those are going to be nice spots to sit and read a book or eat your lunch or whatever people might end up using this space for in the future. So that kind of gives you the overall design scenario that we're looking at there. If you go to the next slide, again, this is in sections. So we've got Oak Road here with your grass strip, and then this is the existing sidewalk. Then we're going to go out about 12 to 15 feet where the street lights are and the street trees. And then you'd have your grade change right there. That's a little seat wall. It's only about 18 inches tall. And then you'd have your lower level, which is the park level, and that's your lawn. So, you can see in this sketch here how now all the power cords and storage, kind of the back of house for those tents, occurs between those tents, so it's not facing Oak Road. Now you've got potentially vendors and booths that are along Oak Road that create that kind of street presence, which would be much more engaging and inviting space than what we've got now. Finally, we'll talk about the main intersection at Oak Road and Highway 78. Currently, there's really nothing here. This is where the stage sets up for the farmer's market. We've got this big stanchion post for the street lights, which isn't going to go anywhere. That's still going to be there. We've got the street lights and street trees. But again, there's really nothing to identify that space as city park, town green. The intention is for this space to become really the front door, the kind of welcome mat for the city to invite people in and have that sense of community in that space. So next slide will show you what we're proposing there. It's very simple, but basically that wall that comes along Highway 78 would turn at an angle that would face that intersection at 78 and Oak Road. We'd have some ornamental landscaping with some seasonal color and shrubs and grasses and things in front of that. And then on the face of that wall would be some letters that might say Snellville Town Green. I've got an example, a quick sketch to show you what that might look like. But a couple other elements real quick. This right here would be vehicular egress for people that are setting up, loading and unloading for the farmer's market. This gives them, again, a designated area to leave the park and get back onto Oak Road, where all that would be paved. Right now, it's not. You just have the sidewalk. So you've got the lawn and then the sidewalk and a grass strip. So over time, that's going to get start to erode away. So now you've got a nice paved surface for vehicles to get in and out of there. And then to accommodate the farmer's market for the music acts that might be there, we've got a little raised brick plaza area behind that sign wall where 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people could set up a small band with an amplifier and some instruments and use this as their entertainment for the farmer's market, which is much more to scale for that type of event. If you go to the next slide, this is just a real quick conceptual sketch of what that sign wall might look like. And again, this would be coordinated with Sky Design to make sure it's consistent with everything that they're doing for the city. But you know, this gives you an idea that that angled section would run from this edge here over to that edge. That's about 40 feet. And you know, that gives you a way to identify that space and dress up that intersection. Next slide. That's pretty much it. We're back at the overall master plan. I wanted to keep this fairly brief tonight. If anybody has any questions or comments.
I have a few questions. The wall that you'll construct around the park, are you saying, I think I heard you say, will there be power run in those walls?
Yes, I actually didn't mention that, but that's a major part of the power element. And I'll talk about that real quickly here. There's a few different elements to that. But we are planning to run power along that whole stretch of the seat wall on Oak Road and also on Highway 78. So there would be outdoor receptacles that would be built into the brick wall at regular intervals that the booths for the farmer's market and for the events could all use to plug into, so that you're not having to run everything from the streetlights. Again, the power was a major issue. Right now, there's not enough circuits. So we really wanted to increase that. And we'll further develop that as we get into construction documents. But that's the plan within the concept here. One other thing to mention is the center circle right here. That's where the Christmas tree is set up right now. And we wanted a solid base for the tree to make it easier to set up and take down. But one of the other things we wanted to address there is the power situation. Right now there's power to light the Christmas tree, but it's not usable for the booths during the events. So we're looking at adding additional power with plug-in receptacles that you could utilize during those events, and protect that power for the Christmas tree, which currently gets flooded every now and then. It's in ground. So we'll have to work out the details of what that looks like.
Well, that little plaza area, as you designated, it's about 30 foot in diameter.
30-foot diameter.
So it's a lot larger than you might think. The other thing too is the plan to run a piece of conduit all the way to the front of the green to where the stage would be toward the electrical out there to run a host of different cables, sound stuff, I mean just anything that we might need in order to facilitate something back at the stage. So there's some vast improvements on being able to handle our cabling deficiencies through the whole project.
And Eric, could you go back to the slide where you've got Oak Road, the section with Oak Road, that one? So my question here is, when you get down to the green level grade, are you actually digging some out there?
We would be along Oak Road. We'd
Okay.
actually be cutting into the slope a little bit. The way that topography works out there right now is once you get past the sidewalk, it starts to slope down towards Highway 78. So what we're looking is actually leveling that first 12 to 15 feet, keep it level with the sidewalk, and then cut down a little bit. So there's a little bit of cut and fill there. But the grade change would be to lower the grade of the green on that side.
Okay, and then also on the Oak Road side where you have the vendor tent,
Mhm.
so between like these light posts, that'll be big enough to be able to put a vendor tent? Is
Yeah,
that what
if
their
you
idea
go back
is?
to the overall plan,
Because I think now they've been putting a lot of them just in the street.
for the events.
For the events.
Yeah, and what we, our intention here, these spaces are roughly 12 feet by 15 feet. So they're plenty big enough to accommodate a 10 by 10 tent. And that was the intent, was to create these designated spots for an individual tent. So that those would, over time, start to become priority spots for different events, activities that are going on. You know, I think those are gonna be real prime locations for different events that are happening in the city, and also for the farmer's market.
Well, and the power configuration on the wall too accommodates both sides.
Any questions?
You
What I'd
mentioned-
like to do.
You mentioned the wall on one side, was to be about 18 inches on the Oak Road side, but about 3 feet on the,
Yeah, and the reason for that is just a little bit more of a buffer on 78. And then the other thing to keep in mind on 78 is that the ground slopes from the bank down towards the intersection. So that, you know, we've got to figure out that grade change with the wall itself. But it'll roughly be about 3 feet tall.
Well done, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haber. What I'd like to do is put this back on our next work session agenda so that we can have some time to digest this and discuss it, and see if we can put it in on a regular meeting as far as action. And that brings us to our update on the SPOS sidewalks. I know we've signed the IGRs with the county. One of the things we delayed I forgot the lady's name, the house there on 78, Jason, do you remember the lady's name? We postponed her rezoning until December, because we were gonna look and see how much we were gonna need as far as easements for the sidewalk, so I wanted to make sure we were moving along with the sidewalk projects.
We are, CPL has started surveying, and it's just pushing them and they're moving.
Okay, so, are we gonna be on track for that lady for December?
We certainly should.
Anybody have any questions about the sidewalk projects? Okay. With that, I will call,
before we do that, I'd like, Mr. Conway had something he wanted to address the council about.
we're tight on time, Mr. Conway.
Quick. I'll be quick, honest. What I want to do just quickly is I want to give each council member my card. This isn't a business move. This is truly for your help.
You've already been hired.
Yeah, but you can hand it to a friend if you like. You may want to be hired again. And what I would
We're a
like
great
to-
time, call this parliamentarian.
Madam Mayor, I ain't trying to hurt, I honestly.
I know.
What I'd like to do is to offer to each council member, and I have already the mayor, to contact me if you have any questions about procedure. In between meetings, of course, you can email me or you can call me, and we can discuss some things over the phone, and I can be, if I can be of any help, I'm sure be glad to. And I want to speak to that just for a moment, and I will be quick. If, for example, one of the council members calls me, and we spend quite a bit of time talking about something regarding procedure, maybe we even go have lunch or something, and the other council members haven't had an opportunity to do something like that, or the mayor, understand that there's no, there's a certain degree of strategy that takes place in city council, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But understand with parliamentary procedure, there is no strategic advantage to learning parliamentary procedure. Because the more you learn about parliamentary procedure, what you accomplish and what you gain is fairness and equity in deliberations. So there's no advantage, there's no gain over and against everybody else if such discussions take place. And so, and I'll say one more thing along those lines, just as a second point to reassure everybody. Always keep in mind that the highest motion in the deliberations is an appeal. If from whatever angle something is taking place from whatever council member or the mayor, and there's a concern about what's going on, and there's concern about the deliberations, up the ladder, you always end up, if you need to, with an appeal and a vote. So the voting majority always has its way. So I just want to stress, if the mayor and I talk, or one of the council members and I talk, we spend quite a bit of time, there is no strategic advantage. It's only a benefit for fairness and equity. So you're welcome to call me anytime or email me.
Thank you. During the work session, the mayor and city council of Snellville, Georgia, Mayor Charlton announced certain matters to be discussed in the closed session of the meeting as council advised the city with respect to closing the meeting. City attorney Powell advised the city of the following reasons to close the meeting.
Executive session.
To discuss pending and potential litigation, settlement plans, administrative, or other